Right, let's get straight into it. Today, we're undertaking a very cold clinical explainer on a massive structural shift in modern governance. We're looking at reporting from mid-2026 that outlines this increasingly symbiotic relationship between Rupert Murdoch's mass media conglomerate and U.S. executive policy. And to be clear right up front, this isn't about taking political sides. It's an objective look at how a broadcasting network has structurally evolved into an unofficial apparatus of statecraft and policy execution. Here is a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Murdoch media empire, then examine the engineering of emotion as news. Third, we'll look at the emergence of a media security council, followed by a specific case study on the Gulf blockade. And finally, we'll map out the network's key players. Section 1. The Murdoch media empire. To understand the sheer scale of this, you really have to look at how methodical the empire's expansion in the U.S. actually was. Starting back in 1986 with Fox Broadcasting, they hit a massive structural shift a decade later, launching the 24-hour Fox News cable channel in 1996. Then, jump to 2007. The acquisition of Fox Business and the highly prestigious Wall Street Journal dramatically expanded their reach straight into global financial and market sectors. And by 2020, they pushed into modern streaming with Tubi. The big takeaway here is the vast institutional reach of this network. They've built this complex ecosystem that covers a massive spectrum of trade, foreign policy, and political influence. Section 2. Engineering emotion as news. So the calculated, philosophical baseline for all this architecture was really established by Fox News' first CEO, Roger Ailes. Ailes wasn't just a television executive. He was an absolute architect of the spectacularization of American politics, having previously advised figures like Nixon, Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. His core strategy, which was literally documented in his 1988 handbook, was that television demands informality. He deliberately avoided presenting material that was purely intellectually oriented. Instead, his strategy was entirely psychological. The goal was to involve the audience emotionally. Prioritizing feelings, specifically anger, betrayal, and threat, was clinically engineered to keep viewers glued to their screens for hours. And you can see this emotional engineering systematically deployed over decades to build these massive audiences. In the 90s, the network capitalized heavily on voter disillusionment and the rise of populism. After 9/11, it went on the offensive during George W. Bush's wars. Through the Obama years, it amplified those deep-seated fears about America's overseas vulnerabilities and the rise of China. Ultimately, this exact formula peaked during the 2020 presidential election. The network aggressively promoted claims of a stolen election, a narrative that heavily inflated their ratings by tapping right into viewer anxiety. But, there are real empirical consequences to engineering emotion over factual orientation. The precise financial consequence of broadcasting those 2020 election claims regarding mechanical vote counting systems was a massive defamation lawsuit. The network ultimately agreed to pay out $787.5 million to settle the manufacturer's claims. It is just a staggering, objective metric of the cost associated with this specific broadcast strategy. Section 3. A media security council. Now, a crucial thing to understand is that this empire isn't just one ideologically uniform monolith. There are definite factions within it. On one side, you have Fox Business and the Wall Street Journal, which generally maintain support for traditional liberalism and America's international commitments. But on the other side, Fox News increasingly houses voices that have shifted to hardline populist positions. They're heavily pro-tariff and highly skeptical of international entanglements. They clash sometimes, for sure, but both factions possess immense gravitational pull on executive policy. And this is where it gets incredibly serious. Just look at these documented intersections between broadcast media and state power during the current administration. The administration actively recruits second-term cabinet members directly from Fox News. Major financial figures like J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon use the network for lengthy policy interviews. During international conflicts, foreign officials, like the right-hand man to Ukraine's president, have literally contacted Fox presenters to attempt mediation. In another documented instance, regular guest General Jack Keane reportedly played a direct role in unblocking an arms shipment to Kyiv that the Pentagon had suspended. Structurally, the network has become a literal backchannel for global diplomacy. Section 4. Case Study, Gulf Blockade. Let's look at a concrete timeline from early 2026 involving the U.S.-Israel war against Iran to really see how this mechanism works. When Washington and Tehran attempted negotiations in Pakistan, the Wall Street Journal strongly opposed the diplomacy. Notice the chronological feedback loop here. Step 1. General Jack Keane goes on Fox News and advocates for a naval blockade.
Step 2, the very next day, the Wall Street Journal publishes an editorial officially proposing that exact blockade. Step 3, the following day, the president orders the naval blockade. Step 4, the Wall Street Journal immediately stakes a claim to the policy's logic in print, pointing out they'd just raised the option in Saturday's paper. This is a direct, documented pipeline from broadcast advocacy straight to presidential executive action.
The actual geopolitical objective behind this clinical maneuver was pretty stark. The logic was to blockade the Gulf to leverage Beijing's economic dependence on that oil, thereby forcing China to pressure Tehran. Now, whether that specific tactic yielded the hoped-for results is secondary to our analysis today. What's primary here is that Fox News and the Wall Street Journal have effectively staked a claim to a seat in the White House's Situation Room. Policy is being workshopped and executed on live television.
Section 5. The network key players. Let's profile the figures actively driving this feedback loop. First, Sean Hannity. He's a foundational asset recruited to New York directly by Roger Ailes in the late 90s. His entire broadcast history is built on directly targeting liberalism. Geopolitically, he's highly hawkish. He was a staunch supporter of the Iraq War and currently supports the war against Iran. Interestingly, he uses his platform to advise the executive branch on specific regional targets, like urging a focus on Venezuela over Canada. He's also used his massive reach to publicly criticize institutional powers, even taking on the Catholic Church and Pope Leo during recent White House tensions.
Then you have Tucker Carlson, who represents a completely different factional philosophy. Rising through the ranks of CNN and MSNBC, Carlson hit a massive peak viewership of 4.5 million on Fox in 2020, but after promoting the 2020 election narratives that led to that massive defamation settlement, he was fired in 2023. Operating independently now, his foreign policy stances sharply contrast with Hannity's. Carlson defends Vladimir Putin, even interviewing him directly, and firmly opposes interventions in Venezuela and the current Iran war. He's essentially become the primary media spokesperson for deep skepticism against any American overseas commitment.
And finally, General Jack Keane, who represents the absolute direct fusion of military, corporate, and media power. He's a retired U.S. Army general, a former deputy chief of staff, and an architect of the Iraq War's surge. But beyond his role as a Fox commentator, he sits on the Commission on the National Defense Strategy and co-founded IP3, a company involved in civil nuclear development in Saudi Arabia. As we just discussed, he's not just a talking head. He's a documented key figure actively shaping live executive decisions, from unblocking Ukraine arms shipments to initiating the Gulf blockade against Iran.
So, as we conclude this explainer, we really have to confront the structural reality we're facing. Show diplomacy is no longer just a metaphor, it is an active executive framework. We have to critically observe these media government feedback loops in real time. If military blockades and international negotiations are being orchestrated through cable news segments and newspaper editorials, we have to ask, how will future high-stakes geopolitical events be shaped by this new media situation room? It is absolutely crucial to keep that in mind as you watch the news unfold. Thanks for joining me on this clinical deep dive.